Welcome to the Great Beer State podcast from the Michigan Brewers Guild. The Great Beer State is a weekly show sharing conversations and stories from the passionate people who contribute to our vibrant Michigan beer community. It is made up of a mix between full-length archived interviews from the Guild's first documentary book project, A Rising Tide, Stories from the Michigan Brewers Guild, and conversations recorded in the here and now. Each episode is kicked off with a conversational update from host Scott Graham, Executive Director of the Guild, and the beer-evangelist Fred Biltman, author of A Rising Tide. Here's Scott and Fred. Welcome to Michigan's Great Beer State podcast. My name is Fred, the beer-evangelist. I'm here with my good friend and Executive Director of the Michigan Brewers Guild, Scott Graham. Scott, welcome to episode 22.
Thanks, Fred. Happy to be here. It's a great day in the state of Michigan.
It sure is. The leaves are turning. It's a beautiful day. And today we're going to head up to the UP, to Grand Marais, and talk to a really early entry in the brewing scene of the whole state, especially of the Upper Peninsula, Karen Brzys. But before that, we'd like to talk about what's going on around the state, what's going on for brewery members, allied members, enthusiast members, and of course, a beer-loving public. What's new?
Well, we've been doing weekly updates, and I think some weeks there have been more eventful happenings. I don't think that there's a whole lot different that happened this week. Of course, we're now under emergency orders from the Department of Health and Human Services instead of executive orders from the governor, but they're largely the same, imposing capacity limits on indoor dining and requiring mask wearing. And so still, there's a lot of concern about the COVID pandemic still, and we see some numbers going up, and so there, it's valid concern. But I look around, and like you said, it's fall, the leaves are turning. As folks may or may not know, I live in the northern part of the Lower Peninsula, and usually that first week in October is about peak color in the tip of the lower. So I think we're just have moved through that, and are starting to see snowflakes every now and then.
Yeah, so that's a good sign. It's last call in some ways. Like it's a great time to get out there, and we happen to be. I was a guest host on a Pure Michigan live stream. That was a collaboration with Shorts last week, and talking to Dave Lorenz of Travel Michigan about how much these fall color tours drive tourism, and really how similar that is to brewing. That you got to go there and see it and take in what's beautiful about Michigan. It was really interesting to kind of get his feedback and also just understand that. And I think in these times, this is always sort of the time to get outdoors to beer gardens and enjoy that fall shift, that seasonal transition. But I feel like under this pandemic and all of these unusual restrictions, it seems like even more important to take this in and enjoy it, support the outdoor spaces. It's going to be, there are going to be some changes and some other difficulties come full winter. So now's the time.
It is a great time to go drive around and have a beer. I'll say that.
So I think we can jump right into, the other update is that it's still more of a stay tuned and a little repetition of what we've been saying the last couple of weeks, but we are preparing for a virtual experience in place of the traditional winter conference. It'll be a collaboration with the Michigan Brewers Guild, Master Brewers Association of America District Michigan, Great Lakes Hop and Barley Conference through MSU Extension. And there will be a multi-day virtual experience available to brewery members and other non-members and public in early January. So do you have any updates on when you expect to be sharing more specifics and what people should be thinking about?
We're hoping to have a schedule together by early November as far as confirming speakers and hopefully working out a schedule. We will have our trade show element featuring our allied business members as well, and that'll be kind of an event within an event, just like it is when we do it live. So stay tuned for early November, and it might be a little later in the month that we actually get the registration open, which will be probably a little bit easier process. It's certainly going to not be very expensive to participate. We just hope to cover our costs.
Right on. And so Brewers Dozen, we mentioned last episode that we had completed the cycle. We'd made it through membership, and it only took us 21 weeks. So this week you've got a new theme, a sort of a special edition of the Brewers Dozen. You want to explain how you group these breweries and then kick us off?
Yeah, it's been quite interesting to talk to folks that opened up just in the last few months. Can you imagine working for 6 or 12 or 18 months or 24 months, whatever, with a scheduled opening date in March of 2020, only to get there and find this year what was going on with everybody being closed down. So what I thought I'd do is just kind of give a salute to those folks that opened anyway. And I just thought we'd go take a look starting in January and up and through kind of current times. So it's a little bit of a shorter list, but my goodness, what challenges. And I'm really proud of these folks for sticking it out.
Yes, that's resilience for sure.
So we'll kick it right off with North Grove Brewers in Montague. So quite a few of these places I have not been to yet. We did some virtual visiting. I called them and talked to them about the brewery and said, hey, appreciate you reaching out and joining the Brewers Guild, but I'm not going to be able to get to your place yet. North Grove sounds like a cool place. Montague's a town north of Muskegon, kind of summary town, I guess it makes me think of, but they opened January 8th, North Grove Brewers.
And next up is By George Brewing Company in Munising. They opened January 31st.
Yeah, again, I spoke with them, and Munising's fairly quiet that time of year anyway, but man, when they got hit right after they opened with only being able to do takeout. Similarly, the Ferndale project in Ferndale, which is actually it's a second operation from Eastern Market Brewing Company. So they opened on February 19th, which was like, I think it might be the day everything, all indoor service stopped. And I know from talking with them, they got creative and they opened up and they did takeout and they did takeout food. Some kind of grocery baskets, some frozen food, and have managed to do reasonably well with what they were doing. Ferndale project in Ferndale.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean to correct you, but if I'm not mistaken, the indoor service was a month later in March, wasn't it? Right after St. Patrick's Day?
You're exactly correct. I think it was March 19th or thereabout.
Which brings us to Gull Lake Distilling Company, who in Galesburg, who opened on March 19th. So they basically hung the open sign.
There you go.
And the state hung the closed sign. Which, what a confusing time too. I mean, veterans of the industry and nobody knew what was going on. Information was coming out in pieces, and of course it's impossible. We've never experienced this, so including the government and the regulators and all the experts, everybody was figuring out one piece of information at a time. I can hardly imagine. I guess we can only imagine opening your doors on that day. So more power to them. They made it, and it sounds like they're still open. So awesome. Way to go, Gull Lake Distilling Company.
And Hand Map Brewing in Battle Creek, they were literally ready to open when the lockdown happened, and they just waited. I think they just decided we'll wait until we can do some opening, and so there they sat. So a very similar story, but geez, right when you're ready to put $1 in the cash register to decide that you're just going to wait a couple more months.
Yep. And then you've got Brickhouse Brews in Sparta, and they opened in May/June. They are a brew pub, and even then, we were just starting to get to the very slightest of relaxation. So early June was when the most restrictive order started to change, at least in lower Michigan. I think northern Michigan was a little earlier.
Yep, that's right. I think it was June 8th for the lower regions. And Brickhouse Brews was formerly Cellar Brewing in Sparta, so the ownership changed and they retooled. They were closed for a while. So I think they opened when things could open in June, but I'm not 100% clear on that. And then opening a little bit later in the month was MI Element Grains and Grounds in Midland. So this is a husband and wife team. He's a scientist, and I think that's where the MI Element comes in, and the grains is beer, and they're a coffee shop with a brewery. So they've got some baked goods and coffee. It's a comfortable little space where you can sit and visit with friends, play a game, but MI Element Grains and Grounds in Midland.
And to wrap up the COVID opening Brewers Dozen, we've got Loaded Dice Brewery in Troy, Michigan. And I think I remember hearing about this during our podcast exploits and some conversations, and they opened in August 28th. So I don't know exactly what was involved there, but that's a building project happening during all these restrictions or planning or whatever, but that's a whole nother challenge.
Yeah, so if these are breweries that you haven't heard of, I encourage you to plan a trip and go visit them. You might find a new favorite place.
Absolutely. And kudos to all of you for having the resilience and ability to persevere and get yourselves open during these challenging times. Congratulations. And welcome to the Michigan Brewers Guild. So with that, it's a good time
welcome.
to pivot and introduce our guest. This is an interview that was recorded in the here and now, although our guest, Karen Brzys, is no longer an active member of the brewing community, but she's an important figure in that she co-founded Lake Superior Brewing Company at the Dunes Saloon, which is in Grand Marais, Michigan. And I remember heading up there in the early days of my career with Bell's, and it just seemed like another world. And, you know, I was accustomed to towns not being familiar with breweries, to regions not being familiar with breweries. And you pull into this little tiny town on the shores of Lake Superior at the end of the road, and there's a brew pub. To me, it has this own sort of emotional and memory resonance with me. And I think I met Karen then, but I didn't have a relationship, so to speak. But when we did the book project, I wanted to get that perspective, and I wasn't able to talk to her during that time. But I was glad that we got connected and were able to have this conversation and look back to what it was like to open and what the brewing scene was like for her.
Yeah, I thought it was a great interview. Again, really fun to listen to. And I was fortunate enough one time when I was in Grand Marais to catch Karen at her Agate Museum and get to walk through there. And I just find her person and her personality to be kind of inspiring. Like she referenced, she's done a lot of different things. I think she brought kind of a studied and methodical approach to deciding that she wanted to maybe have a brewery. It's funny, she mentioned collecting data and inputting it into spreadsheets a couple of different times as she was planning and scheming. And then of course, Chris, who is partners in there with that business, did a lot of the hands-on getting the brewery established and going. But like you said, I have some pretty fond memories of visiting that brewery at the end of the road in Grand Marais, which is one of the most beautiful places you can get to the end of the road. And to find a brewery there, and the Dunes Saloon, and the community is, I, I would recommend a trip up there.
Yeah, and the brewery is still rolling, and Karen is got her own. She'll mention it, but the Gitche, Gumee, Agate, and History Museum is just down the street. I'm pretty sure much everything in Grand Marais is down the street. And so, yeah, she just moved on. But I was just really, I'm really impressed by that. We talk about the resilience of these breweries opening in COVID, and this is a different brand of resilience to bring that idea. And we talked about this during a couple of the different UP interviews and introductions, but you think about the as was mentioned, the original six, the UP brew pubs, you would think would have, on paper, it seems like they should have had a harder time. They had a much more, I think, domestic beer roots and a lot more rural communities, a lot less people, and yet they're all still going strong, and they have some of the longest term brewers. It's amazing to me, and I would have, if I was asked to guess, I would have been entirely wrong. So I think that that's impressive to me, and I guess I'm not really talking about the interview so much. I think Karen talks about it a little bit and the support they had opening up. But it's sort of just one of the reasons for talking to Karen is that I'm just impressed, and I wanted to make sure people were aware of that work that was done and the people that did it.
Yeah, I agree, and that's part of the purpose of the project and sharing these stories, is they are really unique and inspiring, and I think it's that creativity and that maybe sometimes kind of just blind drive to plow ahead and a part of the success of our industry and individual operations within the industry.
Yeah, and like you said, it wasn't an accident. There was a lot of planning and a lot of work, and she and Chris had the vision to believe. They knew it was going to work, and they just had to stay strong in the face of people who thought they were crazy. And that's so much the microbrewing, craft brewing story, is creatives with a lot of talent and skill making it happen and creating something out of nothing. So I think it's a good time to just hand it off to Karen. She is currently of the Gitche, Gumee, Agate, and History Museum, co-founder of Lake Superior Brewing Company at Dunes Saloon in Grand Marais, Michigan. Here's Karen Brzys.
Cheers.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this project. I got involved way back when I was living in the Ann Arbor area, and I happened to be working in legislative affairs. And my boyfriend at the time found out about the brewpub law. And this is actually, he started investigating it before it was passed, but he had an interest in perhaps starting a brewpub. Well, I was traveling a lot at the time, I don't know, a couple, 300,000 miles a year, to be honest. And wherever I traveled, I did two things. First of all, I found brew pubs, and I interviewed owners if I could get them, and or managers, sometimes just the managers. And I asked them, to share with me, if they could, the three things that they did that made the most difference, that they were happy with, and then the three things that they wish they could do over. And I compiled all that information into a database. And then we, of course, followed the legislative effort. And, once it passed, our intent was to start a brew pub around the Ann Arbor area, but to have the Class C license to start, you're not supposed to sell them, but there were three available in the Ann Arbor area at the time, and I think it was about $300,000 each. So that's just a piece of paper, nothing else. And I happened to own a house at the time up in Grand Marais, Michigan. We went up there for Thanksgiving, and the owner of the Dunes Saloon, Mike Ballard, found out, he'd overheard us talking about wanting to do a brew pub, and he said, "Why don't you buy this place and do it here?" So we did.
Wow. Just like that. And so from that conversation to actually getting open and getting licensed and then brewing, what did that path look like?
Well, I continued to intensify my research. We weren't sure about the cost of the equipment. We had planned from the beginning, if we could find a deal on used equipment, we were going to start with that. Ballard didn't have real records, but I got permission from Mike to get all of his vendor records, and I compiled the database, so I had some estimate what his true sales revenue was, and we opened. But the first thing you have to do is, get start towards that path of licensure. And well, we had to build a brewery, so we put an addition on the building, and then started working with the government agencies and getting all the paperwork in order and all the money. We made I think it was a $1 math mistake on one form, and it held things up another week. I mean, it was really quite the process.
Yeah,
But I would say from start to finish, it was pretty quick, actually, 1.5 years.
Yeah, and on top of it, they hadn't processed many brewer licenses in Michigan for a while. I think, prior to that legislation change, there was 3 breweries in the state, and
right. Yeah, and those were on the manufacturer level.
Yeah.
There were no. Of course, you couldn't do it on the retail level.
Right. So opening in '94, as you did, I mean, I just got to imagine there's a lot of quizzical looks on the receiving end of that paperwork as well as filling it out.
Oh yeah.
So it had to be interesting. Did you open did you stay open as Dunes Saloon once you made that acquisition while you worked on the brewery, or did you come
No, right from the beginning, we started, and got the, the paperwork in for the Lake Superior Brewing Company at the Dunes Saloon.
Uh-huh. And
we wanted to have part of the history because the Dunes Saloon did have that history, but we wanted to be a brew pub from the beginning, even though we opened, in July of 1994. We didn't get the brewer's permit until August of 95.
Oh, I see. I got you. So you opened as but it took you a minute before you were brewing beer on site.
Yeah, but we kind of started some of the process even before we physically owned the Dunes Saloon. You got to at least start do your homework, I guess.
Oh yeah. So I was working for Bell's at the time, and I was traveling to the UP semi-regularly and really loved it. But I recall fondly that it was a little bit of a different frontier. I mean, I'd love to hear from you. What was the response? What was the community response to opening a brewery?
Well, not just the community. I mean, the Grand Marais community, but even the brewing community, business community, you name it. Everybody thought we were absolutely crazy. But I ran the numbers myself. I at the time was one of my expertise was projections. So I put all the data into my database, and I projected that this is how we can make this happen. And but no, everybody thought we were absolutely nuts. But one of the first things we did too is we had a grand opening, and I put a packet together, and any possible referral source, motel, campground, gas station, restaurant, within 90 miles of Grand Marais, I dropped off the whole packet, and in that were 2 invitations. It was private only, and we did the party up really well, and we were packed. It worked right from the beginning.
That's great. And did that sort of response sort of keep up? Were your
Absolutely.
projections on point?
I think within the first year, within 5%, and then got better after that, actually.
Yeah. And did you guys have a particular focus or philosophy behind the beer that you were brewing, or what you wanted your place to be known for or be about?
Well, I think one thing that Chris and I both agreed on was that if you like all 6 of the beers, and we knew we decided we were going to have 6, if you liked every one of them equally, you're probably not doing something right. You have to appeal to different palates, and we agreed from the beginning, to be maybe even a little experimental, but we wanted some base beers that people could come in and depend on. So we always had some specials going on, but we had 6 main beers, all of which weren't on tap all the time. And if I had my way, they would have always been on tap. But
Yeah.
it's one of the logistical problems with brewing from Grand Marais is getting supplies.
Oh yeah, I can believe it.
Yeah.
Could you tell listeners a little bit about Grand Marais and the location and what makes that community what it is?
Well, Grand Marais is a beautiful place. If you've not been here, we are the eastern entrance to the Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore, which is located on the south shore of Lake Superior in the north central part of the Upper Peninsula. I think we have the prettiest end, even though the other end has the rocks. We have sand dunes, and it's just beautiful. We were a very large town, 100, 110 years ago. Logging, of course, was the key industry. When that went south in 1910, the town never died, but we went down even at the time to, 350, 400 people year round. And that's still the same number we have today. In the summer, that probably mushrooms to closer to 1,000 people, but we have lots of tourists. So, and this year we had lots more tourists. It was kind of a crazy summer, actually.
Oh yeah, it had to be. So what was your team like? Who was all involved in getting it started, and how did you guys kind of divide the different parts of opening a brewery?
Well, Chris was in charge of getting the addition built, and he was in charge of researching the recipes. And then I was in charge of all of the marketing, staff management. I developed the menu. He did journal entries. I hated journal entries. And we were hands-on with all of it. We were usually floaters, wherever something had to be done. I never cleaned fish. That was another line I drew in the sand, and I wasn't good on the grill, but we filled in wherever it was needed. And given the lack of labor pool in Grand Marais, we had to be working owners. That was required. And early on, Chris did the brewing, but eventually he started training other people to do it.
Gotcha. So you were not alone in your projections that this could work, and even though for a lot of people the Upper Peninsula seems far afield, and there's a lot of distance between people sometimes, you were not alone in thinking that a brewpub model would work well across the UP. Can you tell me about what those early years looked like in terms of the Upper Peninsula community of breweries opening? Because there were a handful there that surprisingly are all still kicking.
Yeah, Hereford and Hops was the first brewpub in the state. In fact, he and I, and I'm actually blocking on his name right now, but we spent some time. We went to Lansing together, I think on 2 occasions.
Don Moody, I think.
Don Moody, oh yeah, Don Moody and his wife. They were very, very nice. And, we actually did share information. His operation was a little bit different. He had the apartments upstairs and such as that. But, we would visit other breweries when we were traveling, whether they be in Michigan or elsewhere. And usually it was just to, kind of yuck it up with people. Chris wasn't really into the marketing part of it.
Yeah. But at least he did the journal entries and cleaned fish.
Yeah. Well, and he took care of building the addition. That's something to be way beyond me. And I think some really good decisions were made. Rather than hire a contractor or whatever, where they're billing you by the hour, we hired our own guy, made him our own contractor, and paid him a good salary.
Nice.
Yeah, and that worked out well, I think, on both ends.
So as the breweries continued to open both across the UP and the state, was that confirming to your research, or was it did it also sort of exceed any expectations just in terms of the sheer it felt like there were a few waves of breweries opening, and
I think it did help, though. I'm kind of an optimist, and so maybe that helped my optimistic projections be more realistic. But one change I did see was more and more people realizing that their palate was satisfied with a fuller flavor beer that, shall I name names? The big American brewers, it just didn't give them. Now, there's still all those that, want to drink a 12-pack, which isn't a good thing in my opinion, and they can't do it with, 12, 16-ounce full-flavored beers. But we saw the numbers change, from 99% American beers to, God, I'd have to think back now. It's been a while since I've been there, but our homemade beer sales was, I'm thinking 40%, 50%, and in the UP of Michigan, that's not so bad.
No, that's pretty good. That wouldn't have been the numbers out in the regular retail trade for sure.
Yeah, that's just a guess on my part, though. It's been a long time, but I know I was even surprised because I only did projections for the first 5 years, and I was there for 8.5.
Uh-huh. So if I'm not mistaken, there were sort of two organizations starting around that. So the Brewers Guild came together in '97, and there was another craft brewer association that I think you might have been involved with Don, and then the guild kind of came forward as the state organization. Were you involved in that? And or I think you also mentioned you were part of a growler bill. Can you tell me a little bit about
I don't remember all the details of the organizations, I'll be honest with you. I do think that you're right. And I don't remember the details about why there wasn't just one from the beginning. But as far as the growler law came, in my research, even before I owned LSBC, in other states, they were allowed to sell the growlers out the door. And of course, in most other states, they didn't have the 3-tiered system. That's, more, difficult to make it happen. But nonetheless, the more I researched, the more I realized you could justify it based on the original legislation. And so, we went forward and met with our legislator and got a bill in and put our data together and made it happen. It was really not that involved. God, I think from start to finish, it was a matter of, I don't remember for sure, 6 months.
Yeah. Do you remember what year that was?
Late 90s is all I can tell you.
Yeah.
Chris has the certificate from the governor on the wall.
Oh, that's cool.
At the brewpub.
So, how did your career develop, and what transpired for you to leave the brewery, and what does it look like for you now, looking back?
Well, I wouldn't call the brewery a career for me. I've actually had 13 career paths, and I guess that's counting owning the restaurant. I've done a lot in my life, but now I own the Gitche Gumee Agate and History Museum. I just finished my 22nd season, and my favorite thing to do is write books, and I also make agate art, agate windows and agate lamps, and run the museum in the summertime. It's been 7 days a week for a long time, and that will change next year, and I'm very happy about that.
There you go.
Yeah. I'm going to spend more time writing books, and then actually the museum will close next August, and the Agate Lady Rock Shop will open up in an outbuilding on my property. That'll open up June 1st, 2022, and I'm excited about that.
There you go. Well, that's quite a life too, for having gone up to the house in Grand Marais and wondering about a brew pub in Ann Arbor, and now you've been up there for a long time making.
Well, my family's from Grand Marais, and
yeah.
I used to hang out at the museum I now own when I was a kid. So it's not a coincidence, actually.
Yeah, that's great. Do you I don't know, I guess with all of your research and projections, have you been surprised by anything in the way craft beer community has developed in Michigan? What are the things that you wouldn't imagine?
Even across the country, I think the whole curve happened faster than I would have thought, given the marketing budget that the American manufacturers have. I was a little worried when they started buying out some of the craft brewers, like, what, we're gonna conquer and defeat our enemy. Mm-hmm. But there's just too many for them to accomplish that tactic. And I think they have to accept that they've got their demographic and the craft brew industry has theirs, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah. And now you see tourism in a whole nother lane, I suppose, with the museum and the agate. Do you find that there are similarities, or do you find that beer is being discussed do you find that beer tourism is sort of contributing to other industries, like other types of tourism? Does that come
Well,
up at all as people come through?
I think there's a few times where there's a husband and wife, and the husband is willing to come because there's a brew pub, and the wife's a rock hound, and so they
Mhm.
agree to come to Grand Marais. There's certainly crossover where they come for the brew pub, find out that of course I decorated the brew pub with all the rock stuff, and the main beers have all rock names, and then they started going nuts about the rocks, and the staff that works at Lake Superior Brewing Company is pretty supportive, and well, the old owner has an Agate shop right around the corner, so and then there's people that come in for the rock shop. I've written all the books and everything, and they come in to see the Gitche Gumee Museum and find out there's a brew pub, and they cross over and go check it out.
Yeah, that's great. What else? I think there's another question that's always interesting to ask because it's just can be a challenge. But there's been a lot of talk about diversity and equity, and the beer industry in modern days has often been, reviewed for sort of a lack of diversity in terms of gender and otherwise. What was it like for you opening a brewery in the mid '90s as a woman brewery owner? Uh, can you share anything about that, or what you wish more people were aware of?
Um, when I did the survey, which is where we got all the information, what I discovered early on, and I had done survey research before too, is you put people on the pedestal and then they think they're, king or queen or whatever, and they share more information than they sometimes maybe even should. Um, and I wasn't threatening them because, I'm looking up at the throne and they're sharing their information about, what they've done well, especially. And it really didn't seem to be a problem. Now, doing the growler law, that was a little bit more of a problem. Larry Bell certainly didn't take me serious. And we became friends after that, actually, but he was late for the hearing. So,
We'll let them know.
oh no, we've talked about it several times since.
Yeah. Uh, so, do you have any encouraging words for people that might be facing that and wondering what to do or how to work forward, or people that need to hear about how the change that's necessary and how we ought to?
Well, I think you do have to do your homework. When you look at the statistics, and I can't remember the exact number, but what is it? 75% of restaurants don't make it 3 years or something like that. It's a very high number. You better know exactly what you're doing, how you're going to do it, and write a business plan and use it. Have contingency plans ahead of time. Make sure you know who your market is. Make sure you know what your potential market share is. Where do the tourist dollars go? Get any data that you can. There's more published than you would think that there is. Spend time in the library and look things up. Another thing about the menu, I really think that was part of our success story. Was I wanted to make sure that we had an interesting menu that with like Scotch eggs and we had flaming ribs. We set them on fire, and it's got to be part entertainment almost. And make sure that every single person in your kitchen follows the recipe every single time. The biggest problem we had is with the cooks. Oh, I've been a cook longer than you've been an owner, and I know how to cook. And they get the salt big container and just pour. A lot of the ingredients, they're not linear. There's a step function there, and you can't have too much. Whatever comes out of that kitchen should taste the same no matter who makes it. And that's part of your success story. And anybody that owns a restaurant that doesn't do that, training, make sure you train your staff. When I'm at a restaurant and I see, a waitress go from one end of the restaurant to another just to get a bottle of ketchup, she didn't clear any tables along the way. You have to teach people to minimize their steps. They will make more money in tips, and they have to be efficient. Your kitchen has to be efficient, and you can't assume just because they worked in a restaurant for 20 years that they know what that means. So make sure you know what that means, and train your staff.
Yeah, it's good advice. Do you have? I guess one interesting question is: what was the favorite part of being at Lake Superior Brewing Company, and what's been your favorite part of being out of it?
um, boy, my favorite part while I was there, I enjoyed the challenge of it because, I'd done, a lot of restaurant work, going through college and all that stuff. But to figure out how to do it in a town of 350 people, I enjoy challenges. All of my career paths have involved very challenging jobs. So that was my favorite part. My favorite part since I left, it's not dealing with drunks. Sorry.
Oh, that's real.
No, it is a real part of it, and I always enforce the rules. And people at the end of the road where Grand Marais is didn't think you should enforce the rules, and I think they were kind of glad when I left in a way. But then some of my policies, like the employee bonuses, those policies went away when I went away, and so then they missed me.
There you
But
go.
being the agate lady and doing what I'm doing now is really what I was supposed to do, and I have no doubt about that. After 22 years of running the Gitche Gumee, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Oh, that's great. Well, congratulations on finding and having that in your life for sure.
Well, thank you.
So if you've got a second, I'd love to go through what we call the Great Beer State Last Call questions. It's just a series of questions we're asking everybody. I think all of them will still apply, even though they're typically getting asked to current breweries. But this applies either way, and even to the museum, is the pandemic question is, how has COVID-19 and all the related regulations, how's that affected your business and also your industry outlook looking ahead?
Well, I can't answer specifically for the Lake Superior Brewing Company, but it's interesting that they early on tried to do appointments, and so they could minimize how many people were in there, and then they decided nobody inside at all. It was all outdoor seating and pick up your order at the curb kind of thing at the front door. And I thought that was interesting, and it didn't seem to affect their business. They seemed packed. There were lines all the time. As far as my business, same thing, and that is because people couldn't go to Europe. They didn't want to travel, to many states away. They didn't want to fly in airplanes. So they looked and figured, well, where can we go where there's not very much COVID? And they came to the UP. We have never, ever seen tourism like we saw this summer. And that's good in some ways, but it's also bad because there was nowhere for them to stay. Campgrounds were full, hotel rooms were full, so they were illegally camping, and, enough said. There was some lack of respect, for the environment.
Yeah, that's got to be difficult.
Yeah, and then
and then you got health and safety on top of it. That you have this potential of it being harmful to people.
Well, there was quite the diverse opinion in Grand Marais. The elderly population of town were quite upset that the tourists were there. They felt that they were held hostage the whole summer. The chamber had some early events, and then the town residents kind of went nuts and said, you got to care about us too. I enforced all the rules. You didn't come in my museum without a mask or without hand sanitizing. I had some horrible incidents, but a friend of mine from college, he heard about a couple of them, and towards just the end of the summer, he gave me $50 for everybody I kicked out that wouldn't wear a mask.
There's a new bonus program. The next question is the more you know. So what beer style do you feel most connected to, and what do you wish more people knew about it?
I wish people would trust the hops more. At the time, our pale ale was my favorite one. I'm not one for the flavored beers, but I'll tell you what, our cherry wheat sold very well. Our lighter beers certainly sold the most, but then you get your people that want the stout, and if they were dedicated to the stout, you had to cover all the palates, like I already told you. But, I wish people would just trust the hop a little bit more.
Makes sense. So what about your ideal home bar? Do you, what's your home bar setup like? And do you have any suggestions for people who are spending more time serving and enjoying beer at home?
Oh, you mean at home?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess home bar has a few different connotations, but.
I have it well stocked with everything.
There you go.
What else can I say? I've always thought it was really cute where the people had built-in places for their pony kegs.
Yeah. Yeah, I like well stocked is sound advice, in my opinion. Love and hate. Do you, in terms of like current trends, I suppose in beverage and beer, do you have any trends that you love or hate?
I'm really, and I drink some of them too, the flavored malt liquors. It's kind of out of control. There's way too many of them and trend in the industry. It's not with the craft brewing industry, but it's almost like they're trying to pretend like they're crafty too, doing these malt beverages. So I kind of hate that. And what do I love right now? I mean, I love the fact that more and more people are, willing to try craft beer.
Awesome. Do you remember your first drink?
It was probably Boone's Farm.
Excellent. How about your worst drink?
Oh, geez. Actually, the one beer that I just can't do. We went to the Brewpub convention out in Oregon, and they were featuring. God, it's the I can't remember the name of the of the ingredient that's in there, but is it Blue Moon or something from Europe? It's the Europe flavored, and it's got, I can't remember the name of the ingredient, but I just can't do that ingredient. And I'm not a big one for bourbon or anything like that. I like liqueurs.
There you go. So what about a bucket list drinking companion? Is there somebody alive or dead that you haven't had a beer with, but you'd love to?
I would love to have a drink, and I did have one once, but it was brief, with my high school English teacher.
All right.
She was Italian, so she'd be a lot of fun, and because of her that I can write books.
I love that. I still am in contact with my junior high English teacher, and it's a relationship I cherish. So I'm down with that. We're due for another beverage.
And of course, my uncle and aunt, I only have one of each, but I love having a cocktail with them. And they're still alive.
That's nice. Well, thanks so much for taking time with me today, and thanks for bringing Lake Superior Brewing Company at the Dunes Saloon into the world and sharing such a great place, creating and sharing such a great place and great beers. I really appreciate it.
Okay, well, thank you, Fred. Good luck with your project.
Thanks, Karen.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Take care. Thanks for listening and sharing while supporting Michigan breweries and craft beer everywhere. The Michigan Brewers Guild was formed in 1997 with its first summer beer festival taking place in July of 1998. Its now 5 annual festivals are dedicated exclusively to Michigan beer brewed by more than 270 member breweries. The Michigan Brewers Guild exists to promote and protect the passionate Michigan beer industry in every way possible. To learn more, visit us at mibeer.com or say hello on one of our social media pages, as we love hearing from you. From coast to coast, from far and near, let's drink Michigan beer.